Welcome back to Sungrown Stories. I'm your host, Alexandria Irons, founder of Queen of the Sungrown, and I am thrilled to be back with you today. It's been a hectic summer full of gardening and playing outside and just literally soaking up the sun here in the inland Northwest. In northeastern Washington, it is a long, cold winter, so I have been thoroughly enjoying being outside. In fact, I'm looking out my window right now, watching the herd of cows just frolicking in the field. This has been just one part of my enjoyable summer, watching animals and playing with my son, watching plants grow, and of course, looking at insects. Yeah, that's right. Today we are talking about pests, plant hormones, and integrated pest management, otherwise known as IPM, and how they all play a role in producing the most chemically diverse and tasty cannabis. I'll be sharing excerpts from my Patreon article on Jasmonates and a sneak preview to my IPM masterclass and flower safe foliar crash course that happened this month. It's available in recording on my website at queenofthesungrown.com/classes. So, without further ado, let's begin. What is a pest? In the world of gardening, there are a slew of insects that we would consider pests. Aphids, spider mites, thrips, you know them, you can name them. These are creatures that damage your crop in a way that affects the overall quality. But believe me, a few insect holes in your leaves is really nothing to worry about. In fact, those little bites stimulate a plant hormone response known as Jasmonic acid. All right, so what is Jasmonic acid? Jasmonic acid is part of a bigger group known as jasmonates, and this is a group of phospholipid-derived plant hormones that signal different processes in plants. So phospholipids are fatty acids that make up cell membranes, and they're mostly made up of carbon, hydrogen, and a phosphate molecule. They play a key role during different stages of plant development and in plant defense responses to environmental stressors, such as pest pressure, and they also communicate between other plant hormone pathways. So these signaling pathways play a key role in a plant's survival to varying environments and can be manipulated with external applications to increase resistance to pathogens and herbivorous pests such as biting, piercing insects, aphids, spider mites, thrips, grasshoppers, etc. And these plant hormones also increase terpene production. So, jasmonates include jasmonic acid and its derivatives like methyl jasmonate, which was first isolated in 1962 from the oil of Jasminum grandiflora flowers, for which the hormone was named. Originally, it was considered a stress-related hormone, but now we know it works in a complex signaling network with other phytohormones like ethylene, salicylic acid, abscisic acid, etc. The complexities of these interactions is vast and are not completely understood. Continued research and experimentation will help us understand how we can utilize this hormone to improve crop yield and terpene production. So what do plant hormones even do? As a major immunity hormone, the jasmonate family of oxylipins promote plant defense to mechanical wounding, chewing insects, and necrotrophic pathogens. In addition, jasmonates generally repress vegetative growth while promoting reproductive development. So increasing your jasmonic acid during flower is that terp tea that we're looking for. And I actually have a recipe on my Patreon for terp tea you can make yourself to stimulate jasmonic acid. Anyway, when a plant is wounded, it will create an accumulation of jasmonic acid on its own. And in turn, that produces secondary metabolites like methyl jasmonate. So by applying external sources of JA, jasmonic acid, or methyl jasmonate, you can increase a plant's resistance to stress. And in experiments performed by WSU, plants exposed to methyl jasmonate produced higher levels of defensive proteins. So this experiment goes further to validate the importance of companion planting and biodiversity by exposing the test plant species with methyl jasmonate obtained from sagebrush leaves, which is known to have really high levels of methyl jasmonate. So they basically took the methyl jasmonate from this sagebrush plant and introduced it to another plant, and it demonstrated the interplant communication can occur from one leaf species of plant to another leaf species, and it activated the expression of defensive genes from one plant to the other. So, like I said, these if you've listened to my chat with Mr. Grow It, Taste the Terpenes, I go into full detail about this. I've given classes and talked about this for years, that these terpenes, secondary metabolites, are the communication of plants with other organisms. And that's why it's just so beautiful to garden in an ecological way, where you're monitoring the interplay of an ecosystem where everything is intertwined and beautiful and harmonious. Obviously there can be gives and takes, checks and balances, and pests can become a problem, but when you're in a balanced ecosystem, they shouldn't be, because you should have a balance of predatory insects and enough sufficient food for these pest quote unquote species to thrive on without having to attack your plants. Back to the article. This is an excerpt that I wrote for my Patreon members on jasmonates. So each month we go down a rabbit hole talking about a particular gardening topic or plant, botany, biology, soil food web, whatever it is. And you can choose. You can help make that decision by being a member of Queen of the Sun Club. All right, so jasmonates also increase a plant's resistance to stresses like heat, cold, drought, salt, heavy metal, pathogens like viruses, and they signal other plant hormones, like I said, like salicylic acid. Those two work synergistically with them to increase resistance to environmental stressors. So jasmonic acid talks to salicylic acid, which is known for abiotic stressors, where jasmonic is biotic, meaning related to life stress, so like pathogens and pests and insects, and then salicylic acid is known for stress response in things like abiotic, meaning not related to life, like heat, drought, etc., the environment. So when jasmonic acid breaks down into the volatile organic compound methyl jasmonate, it triggers the production of plant defenses, such as increasing terpenes and resin production. The implications for using this hormone in cannabis are obviously beneficial for increasing plant immunity, terpene production, and can even attract beneficial insects. The production and dispersal of methyl jasmonate actually attracts parasitic wasps. These are insects that are known to parasitize insect pests such as aphids and caterpillars, making them an excellent addition to an integrated pest management plan. Jasmonic acid also shows potential for inhibiting viral infections such as tobacco mosaic virus and hop latent viroid. Studies show that methyl jasmonate is essential for resistance against TMV, tobacco mosaic virus, and plants given a foliar application of JA triggered systemic resistance against TMV and inhibited the spread of the virus. With plant viruses currently spreading throughout the cannabis community, improving your resistance to them with jasmonic acid may be very beneficial. In other studies, melon seeds treated with methyl jasmonate completely suppressed infections of the fungal pathogen Didymella bryannae. I'm butchering that. Seedlings treated with methyl jasmonate produced necrotic lesions where the fungal pathogen attempted infection, preventing it from spreading to healthy tissue. Methyl jasmonate treated seeds saw an increase in pathogenic related proteins, chitinase, and peroxidase, as well as a rapid accumulation of lipoxygenase. Results of the study indicate application of methyl jasmonate activates seedlings' diverse metabolic pathways, leading to the enhancement of resistance against distinct pathogens. Now, how can you influence plant hormones, right? Aren't these just things that freaking plants produce? No, we can manipulate them. And that starts with just understanding how they work in plants. So with jasmonic acid, we understand that it is a response, a defense response to biotic factors such as biting from insects or fungal infections. So we don't want those pests, but we can trick your plant into thinking that it's being attacked by some of these pests so that it produces jasmonic acid that will then increase its immunity when pests actually come, and it's increasing that wide variety of secondary metabolites that contribute to the flavor of our cannabis, right? So terpenes, flavonoids, esters, that is all increased when you increase the jasmonic acid levels in your plant. And I'm sorry, but a sterile indoor environment is not stimulating jasmonic acid. Okay, so there's things that you can do to stimulate jasmonic acid inside, like a terp tea recipe available on Patreon. But the natural cacophony of insects and birds and life in nature in an ecosystem is by far the best stimulator of jasmonic acid. So with this impressive list of positive influences jasmonates have on plants, their potential as a biocontrol suggests advantageous uses in the future of commercial agriculture and your garden. So by increasing the amount of jasmonates in and around your plant, you can increase its resistance to all forms of stress. You can influence these levels through mycorrhizal inoculation, as well as the introduction of external application of jasmonates. So plants inoculated with arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi show threefold increased levels of jasmonate production. Several studies have shown the synergistic effects of AMF and JA. One study shows that plants inoculated with AMF and then treated with JA grew significantly larger and faster than the control plants. Another study shows that plants colonized with AMF increased the production of lipoxygenase activity, which is a key enzyme in the JA signaling pathway, explaining one form of synergy. Plants increase their jasmonic acid when colonized with AMF, therefore increasing their resistance to pests, diseases, and viruses. So if you want to increase your plant's jasmonates, you should definitely inoculate your plants with AMF, with specific strains like Rhizophaga irregularis, formerly known as Glomus interdices. This particular strain is known and studied to have a specific relationship with cannabis, and you can grab it. Bigfoot mycorrhizal is my favorite AMF inoculant. You can grab it at my store. Use Welcome 15 for 15% off, and I will also send samples of different various ways to inoculate. It's an amazing product. I'd love to have Bigfoot on here to do an interview. Would be great. I need to figure that out. Okay, anyway, Inoculation as early as possible is preferred. So you can roll your seeds in it, you can dip your clone roots in this strain, and then these are both efficient ways to colonize early on. I typically inoculate my plants every time I transplant. I put a little bit of AMF on the root zone just to make sure that that inoculation is going strong, because it needs to be inoculated, but then it needs to thrive in an environment that is conducive to mycorrhizal fungi, right? So a dry back is not a way to increase your mycorrhizal fungi. You want a nice, damp, living soil with mulch, moisture, and microbes. So there are many other benefits to inoculation of AMF, and increasing jasmonic acid is just one of them. Plants will increase their levels of jasmonic acid when they believe they're being attacked by pests. So you can trick your plant into thinking it's being attacked by introducing insect frass. So insect frass is essentially the excrement of insects. It's incredibly high in chitin, which is a polysaccharide used in exoskeletons and fungi cell walls. It creates a tough membrane and can influence the levels of JA your plant produces. Now, the synergy between organisms is just one benefit to growing in a living soil system. If you're unable to grow in this manner, there are also other ways you can introduce JA to your plants. One way is to increase your jasmonates through external application. And this can be done by introducing plants with high levels of JA, such as those in the jasmine family or sagebrush, as previously mentioned. Unfortunately, there are few resources documenting the levels of JA in plant species, and further research will be needed to compile a comprehensive list. Introducing plants as companions to your cannabis garden or veggie garden, the environment, extraction through ethanol, or possibly fermentation. Fermentation has not been done, though, in a lab setting to validify the extraction process of JA. So extracting your own JA through fermentation, we just don't know if that works, because fermentation uses microorganisms to break things down, and we don't know the interaction of the chemicals that are present and how they're going to be altered through the process of fermentation. But extracting your own JA isn't the only way to introduce this hormone to your garden. In fact, you can buy methyl jasmonate online and JA extractions and actually apply them to your plants through foliar or root drench applications. Because these hormones trigger senescence and sexual development of plants, it is my opinion that applications should be treated during the flowering phase of growth only. And in fact, I just did a crash course on flowering safe sprays for cannabis. So for the medicinal plant that we all know and love. So check it out, foliar crash course. Additionally, jasmonates are an integral in seed production and can be used to treat seeds prior to germination without any adverse effects. So treating plants with JA is experimental, and commercial application is not widely used, if at all. But it's a fun path to explore and think about. Therefore, use of jasmonates should be done in a research manner with detailed observations and notes taken throughout the process. And I mean, plant hormones are complex phytochemicals that trigger, communicate, and alter a plant's life inexplicably. So because plants cannot move, they rely on these hormones to survive. Increasing our understanding and knowledge of how different compounds are used by plants supports a holistic approach to gardening and farming by working with nature. With a brief understanding of what JA is, what it does, and how you can manipulate it, you're on your way to beginning a journey into the world of plant hormones. We'll do an entire episode on plant hormones, you guys, because it's something that's really fascinating to me. And jasmonic acid is just one of many plant hormones, and JA is produced in nearly all plant species at varying levels, and it communicates with the rest of the plant hormones. So this is a great introduction to plant hormones with jasmonic acid as it relates to IPM and pest management. So growing outdoors, obviously, in the presence of insects, fungi, and a diversity of plants is going to create a more robust plant with a wider range of chemical diversity from these plant hormones, which results in an increase in other secondary metabolites like terpenes, flavonoids, esters, methyl jasmonate. And these are the flavors and smells that we associate with loud, aromatic weed. And so they are essentially the language of plants between plants and other organisms, from fungi and bacteria to beneficial and pest insects. Now, obviously, a little pest pressure is different from an infestation, and understanding the insects in your garden is the best way to protect your crop. But just because there's an insect doesn't mean it is necessarily a pest. And I believe all life has intrinsic value simply for existing. This ecological approach to gardening is understanding that all life is intertwined and a part of nature. The presence in an ecosystem has a far-reaching impact, and we just simply can't fathom without thought and consideration. It definitely takes empathy and a shift in perspective, putting yourself in the shoes of the insect, right? This is where IPM comes into play. So IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management, and it is the sustainable method of treating insect pests in your garden. And it addresses 3 specific approaches that work in harmony to address pest problems. And they are cultural, biological, and chemical treatments, which should be used in conjunction with as little chemical use as possible. Unfortunately, many gardeners go for chemical solutions first because they simply don't understand the intricacies of ecosystem processes and the checks and balances that are found in nature. So if you're interested in learning the nuances of IPM, I highly recommend taking my class, How to Treat Pests Organically. All listeners will receive 50% off with code IPM. And while my focus is on outdoor cultivation, this class covers 3 hours of lecture, articles, recipes, and includes a 28-page pest guide that can be used for your indoor garden as well. So cultural practices are things like showering before going into your garden, not cross-contaminating tools or equipment, or just quarantining new plants before introducing them to the rest of your nursery. While biological treatments include entomopathogenic organisms such as zombie fungus like Bavaria bassiana, or targeted pest-specific bacterium like Bacillus thuringiensis. To learn more about these different types of organisms, check out my latest article on entomopathogenic microbes at patreon.com/Queen of the Sungrown. You can buy these types of microbes from Bokashi Earthworks, owned and operated by Brandon Rust, who I just had to get on here to discuss IPM. So welcome, Brandon. Let's talk about this holistic IPM, things that you like to do, where you start, because we're starting to get into flower and we want to make sure that we don't have any problems.
Yeah, so integrated pest management and biosecurity really depends on, what you're doing. If you're in indoor cultivation, obviously biosecurity is really important. I was having a conversation yesterday with one of the people that I consult with, and they were asking thrips. And, one of the things that I was saying is that you also need to make sure that you do management on the outside of your facility to make sure nothing's coming from the outside. And then also doing things that are preventative. Like when I take cuts, for instance, when I'm doing cloning, I always dip my clones in some type of solution, something like Sufoil X. You could use Kia, you could use, a bunch of different things. You use wettable sulfur. And then once those things are rooted, I plug them, and then once they're rooted, I dip them again before they go into veg or whatever next stages for that particular plant. And one of the things that I like to remind people is that the longer that you have in veg, the more resource it's going to be consuming, and the longer that that plant is susceptible to pests and pathogens. So I always like to, in an indoor setting, kind of do more of a sea green style where you take a lot of clones, you do more plants to fill out the canopy instead of growing out a big canopy and then removing 2/3 of that canopy. It eliminates a lot of time and resource, and so that's one thing. But you should have a SOP, like a standard operating procedure, and whatever that is, you should make sure that you're following. For me, it's really simple. I have three main products that I use for spray applications. So I have Sufoil X. I have, but I don't use it often, micronized sulfur, and then I also have cold pressed Kiaha. And I mix the cold pressed Kiaha with either the Sufoil X or the micronized sulfur because it helps. It's a surfactant, so it helps spread the water evenly over the plant surface. And you can use a surfactant with a lot of different products, and it just helps with increase the efficacy of those products. But and then maintaining canopy maintenance until if you're indoor, at least the first 2 weeks of flowering while the plants are bolting. But I don't recommend spraying anything after that unless it's absolutely necessary. And then if it is absolutely necessary and you're in flowering, there's very few products that I could recommend, like maybe like an enzyme product or like a just a biocontrol.
Yeah, I was gonna say you sell microbes on your website, and I actually use some of those during flower outdoors, like Bacillus subtilis or Trichoderma as a foliar application, especially when it starts getting, cooler and we're having chances of mold. It does a really great job of outcompeting with
Yep.
other fungal pathogens. Um, let's talk about outdoor stuff because we're an outdoor crew here. I mean, everyone's dabbles in both. But what about you? I mean, I saw on your Instagram you got some monsters out there. So
I
let's
do. I
talk
can show you
IPM
those
support.
here in a minute. Okay, so let me just back it up real quick, though. Those three things were for spray application. You also need to be treating your media. So if it's your soil or whatever it is, you should also be doing something. I like to use Beauveria bassiana. Steinernema feltiae nematodes are really good. I also like to use the microglyph BCM, which is actually a mosquito larvicide, but it works for fungus gnats as well. And these are different things that you can add into your soil to keep insect pressure and pests in your soil down as well. So you need to be treating both your root zone and your phyllosphere.
Yep. Is that last product BTI?
Yes,
Yeah. Okay. And that's
it's
amazing. It just is the nuance of having to, I guess, just pay attention and understand how biocontrols work when you're growing organically and sustainably, because a lot of people will just be like, okay, I'm going to grab, you know, whatever kind of chemical pesticide, but we can't do that for cannabis.
no, and you don't really need to anyway. These products are really efficient and they're oftentimes more cost effective. Let's take, we can do this for outdoors, right? Using something like the Bacillus subtilis and Trichoderma. So one of those is a fungus, one of those is a bacteria. They work synergistically together, and the Bacillus subtilis will colonize the fungal filaments or the hyphae that the trichoderma is producing. They both produce similar metabolites, including hydroxymate siderophores, which chelate iron and keep iron bioavailable. They're both streptophytic. I said that wrong. I pronounced that wrong, but um, they break down soil organic matter. They cycle phosphorus, and they outcompete pathogens. So they're a multifunctional product that has multiple benefits, but that will also combat things like septoria or fusarium, botrytis, powdery mildew. It works to outcompete all of those things, like you mentioned earlier. And you can treat both your phylosphere and the soil as well. And what that'll do is you get all of the benefits of having it in your soil with the nutrient cycling, outcompeting pathogens, protecting it from the septoria, and then they also work as endophytic microorganisms. The trichoderma works very similarly to the endomycorrhizal fungus, where it will do the exact same functions that those microbes do. They'll transport water and nutrients and trade for carbon and root exudates that are being provided. So I really like the trichoderma and Bacillus subtilis combination, and I like to spray it because it'll also colonize the phyllosphere, and that is why it's able to outcompete things like powdery mildew and bud mold and stuff like that. But it's also that time of year where the caterpillars come, and if anybody who's done outdoor knows that those little caterpillars, they burrow through your nugs, making a trail of mold. They'll ruin the tops. They'll just ruin whatever they touch. And in that case, you should be applying regularly something like BT, BTK,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's Bacillus thuringiensis. And the reason why is because we know it's that time where they start to come. And if you're, taking preventative maintenance and you're really doing your spray applications until um, they start to flower, you're going to have uh, better results. And if you start flowering something that already has insect pressure and you let it go untreated, it's going to get far worse during flower. That's my observation from my many years of experience.
Definitely. And you're in Oklahoma, so you have like way more bugs than folks up north like me. I am now near the Canadian border and my pest pressure is like I've sprayed maybe 3 times total in veg. It's amazing. There's nothing there. The most pest pressure I have right now is some caterpillars and leafhoppers. And
Mhm.
I was interested in learning more biocontrols for that as well. I did a class with Chris Trump last year on the IPMO, and
Yeah.
Steve Potent Ponics is all about like collect the grasshoppers and create that. That's
Well,
personally,
'cause
I don't.
Steve was when Steve was in Thailand, what he was doing is he could go down to the market and he could go grab like kilos of crickets, right? Crickets. And so what he was doing was he was blending them all up in a blender, making a meal out of it, and then he was inoculating it with Bouveria bassiana, because for that microorganism to stay active, that's one of the really cool things about Bavaria is it'll break down soil nutrients, it'll cycle just like a lot of these other microorganisms, but it also has all these different modes where it can pair to size insects, it can work as a plant endophyte. And in that case, it all that chitin from that insect shell helps it proliferate in that substrate, and that's a really cool method. For me, I just have spores of Bouveria bassiana that I mix in water, and I'll add a little bit of Kiaha just to help with, um, help it like kind of stick and just stay in place without too much dripping off the plant. I'm getting better coverage overall, and I just spray. Leaf hoppers are susceptible to the Bouveria bassiana. So if you can get them early, because what I notice is at least here in Oklahoma, early in the spring they start to come out, and if you start early in the spring and you take care of it, you won't see high insect pressure, and then they start coming out again around this time of year, or like right when it starts to cool off again.
We have a question from Joe. He wants advice on gray grasshoppers. Do you have any advice for him?
Yeah, the best thing that I know of is the Bouveria bassiana. They have a strain, it's called GHA, which is grasshopper active. It's effective against grasshoppers, leafhoppers.
I did not
Yeah.
realize that Berry Bassiana um, worked so well on grasshoppers. I mean, I spray like the Botanigard, but um I haven't noticed, like I guess I'm just looking for, you can see like fungus like aphids growing fungus out of them when they're like the entomopathogenic fungus attacks them. But I've never found a grasshopper that's like that. So I guess I just assumed it didn't because I haven't seen it, and that's like, you know, faith, I guess. I need to have faith in the fungus to do its job, but cool. Yeah, I've got my chickens running through the garden, so they've been taking out like tons of leafhoppers and grasshoppers. I'm not like really that worried about it because it's not, sometimes it can be crazy, but they're not that bad, and I kind of feel bad killing them. But um I did see that the leafhoppers can be vectors for like beet curly top virus. Do you have
Yeah,
any experience with that?
I don't know if I've ever seen beet curly top virus, but I have seen, and I have a plant actually that I hold on to. I actually took it down to my tissue culture lab today. I'm gonna probably work on it tomorrow. Which is it has a some type of mosaic virus, and it expresses it as variegation. And a lot of people say, "Hey, this is variegation. This is variegation." But what I constantly see is that with really really good when the soil numbers are like on point, you'll see it grow out of it a little bit, and then as it matures, it kind of goes back into that mode. So I'm pretty sure that it has something to do with a viroid, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm gonna tissue culture it, and I'll do meristem tissue culture on it, and then I'll see if that changes anything. I already sent it to get tested, and it came negative for like hop latent viroid, but that's all I tested for was hop latent. So I know it's not hop latent, so I think it's something else. Um,
Yeah, that's interesting because so maybe like 4 years ago in a greenhouse I had in California, I had some of the traditional mosaic patterning in some clones I got, and it was definitely a virus. I didn't get it tested, but I could see stunting, dudding, so I was assuming it was hop latent. But I have a plant that has variegation and it has a little bit of curling on several of the tops, similar to the beet curly top virus. So I was hypothesizing because all pretty much the viruses are attacking the chloroplasts. So that's why we can see that deficiency in chlorophyll, a little variegation or mosaic patterning. But it's my first time, I mean, playing with this specifically. So not sure exactly what I should do about it. I'm hoping like that it's not infecting my soil like the hop latent infected the soil. So when I did 3 runs in that greenhouse like depping and then light assist, and the plants planted after subsequently even though they were clean ended up having hop latent because I was in a living soil system where I left root balls, and I should have pulled all the root balls out thinking, hindsight 2020 whatever. But it's really interesting how these pathogens and viruses and viroids can maintain in mycorrhizal fungi, can be passed through leafhoppers, grasshoppers, all kinds of things. So I'd be interested to hear how you're dealing with it with the tissue culture because I have heard that you can tissue culture out with possibly.
well, I just got my lab set up, and I'm gonna start going to work in there. But what essentially I'm gonna be doing is taking the meristem, and what you have to do is you have to find a node, and you have to peel back all of the biomass to basically get this little, basically like a cell embryo, and that thing is pretty much completely sterile. And you have to get that on a tissue culture media and just let it grow. And after a little while, you change up the media to a type of media, one's to create roots, one's to create, biomass. And then when you have enough roots established, you can put it into like a clean soil or something like that, or whatever it is, cocoa, whatever it is that substrate the person's using, and it cleans it up from that viroid. You can also take that new Gen Zero clone, and then you can let it grow a little bit, and then meristem that again, and you can do that a couple times just to like guarantee. I mean, it's a long process, but it would guarantee that that thing is completely free of the viroids.
Yeah, I wonder where we're gonna see like what direction we're gonna go with now that we're seeing clones being shipped all across the United States, people are able to do this
Oh,
because of the farm bill loophole. Like are we gonna have more regulations and like put in place for these viruses, like agriculture. I mean, California, you can't even come in, with fruits or vegetables in your car.
I mean, that's a very valid point. I think that once federal legislation is passed, you're going to see GMP, which is General Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Practices, implemented, and there's no standardization on a federal, or there's no regulating body for that in cannabis. But if you were to look that up and look at all the procedures, you could essentially model your facilities off of the standards that they would adhere to in the pharmaceutical manufacturing space. So it's definitely a possibility that things have to be tested, and it could be something that's mandated by law. Who knows? We'll see how that works out. I don't see why somebody wouldn't lobby for that, especially if they. I mean, I can see how somebody would lobby for something like that, especially if it had a benefit to their own business. I can tell you this: companies like Medicinal Genomics, they have the ability to map out whole cannabis genomes, and they have the Cannapedia, where you can look at all of the different sequences that they've mapped out for different resistances. One of those things is COG7 mutation, which gives the plant resistance to hop latent viroid. And I think and I know we'll see this. I'm working on a project with a lab, and thinking that medicinal genomics will also be involved for both genetic assisted breeding to see if these certain characteristics that are present in certain varieties will pass those off on the progeny, and how often, what the ratios are. You could see just by popping a seed, putting it in a little test tube, and doing PCR analysis with a primer. And if the primer says yeah, it's there, then you know that those genes are present in those seed batches. And they're going to go even further to where they're isolating these different genes that are found in cannabis and inserting them similarly to the way they do in CRISPR, and they'll create varieties that express certain terpene profiles and have certain THC percentages and have these gene resistances inherently built into them. So if they're able to cultivate a variety that has all that genetic potential, very well, they should have a good product, and it's probably something that they're going to use and have IP on. So it just depends on all the regulation federally, but I imagine it's going to happen. People are already starting to do it.
Interesting. Wow. So they are, so is it genetic modification with, like, so they're splicing like CRISPR, where they would be inserting other type of, I mean, right? CRISPR is essentially you're inserting, like, the way a bacteria inserts something into a virus and extracts a piece of that DNA. So is it going to have different DNA in it, or what? I'm that's a little bit above me of what you were saying.
So I think what'll happen is that when these gene sequences are isolated and identified, um, and then when I mean identified, where they figure out what that gene code does specifically to the plant, they'll use cannabis. I don't think they're going to start taking shit from jellyfish and inserting it into cannabis. I'm talking about inserting sequences that already exist in cannabis into cannabis, so that way they can change the genetic code.
So, like, for instance, plants that have hop latent and don't show signs of it, that are fine, would they then, like, target possibly those plants that have that, look through the genes and see if there's something in there that's, making
Yeah,
it so that it
they
doesn't
could
show?
like they could have a mutation that makes it so that way they're resistant, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the plant can't get the viroid, but it might mean that it's asymptomatic. I think asymptomatic is the word, where it actually
Mhm.
doesn't show any symptoms of ever having it. It doesn't affect the quality or the yield. It's just there. Or Maybe there's a combination of those, because I think there's several different mutations for this, where it could just make it outright resistant, or outright it just can't contract hop latent viral, because it doesn't have the ability to replicate, or who knows what it does. Whatever that mechanism of action is, that's going to happen because of that gene is there.
Interesting. That's so interesting. Science is so cool. The things that we can do and the ability to share this knowledge. I like to call this type of gardening ecological gardening because, first and foremost, you're considering you and your garden as integral parts of the ecosystem. You're not trying to rigidly control your garden, but rather noticing the works of nature and working with it. But IPM doesn't mean you can't use chemicals, it just means use them sparingly and consciously. Even a lot of pesticides that say they are organic are systemic and should be only used during vegetative growth and at certain times of the day to reduce the impact on beneficial insects. Again, I discuss these chemicals in great detail in my IPM class, so go check it out, queenofthesungrown.com/classes. One company that has recently come to my attention for providing a safe chemical pesticide is Organishield. I reached out to the owner, Holt, to discuss what this product is and how it works.
My name is Holt Crowder, and I am with a company called Organishield. Organishield is an bioorganic IPM. The molecule in Organishield that is called the active ingredient is a sugar ester molecule. It's not sweet, but it is made by nature. It's called sucrose octanoate. There is very few plants in the plant kingdom, but the ones that secrete this is Mother Nature's natural bug defense. They secrete this on their trichomes as a natural a bug defense to stop the bugs. And the scientists saw this and they were like, why is this happening? And that was the study started this, I believe, in 1996 or 98. So there's a lot of history behind what is now called Organishield. But some of the things I really enjoy about it is that it is a copy of Mother Nature. We could not extract it from the plants because it just wasn't commercially viable to do that from a cost structure. And so there's a group that figured out how to produce this exact copy of this molecule. And I think you and I were talking before in the pre-show a little bit about the manufacturing side of this. One of the things that I'm very proud of is during the manufacturing, there's no downstream waste in the making of this. There's a few organic solvents that used, but they're actually reused back in the process. So it's a multi-vacuum phasic distillation process. It's not simple to do, but it's unlike some other products out there. But something that makes it very unique is you're not going to find another product on the market that contains sucrose octanoate as an active ingredient. We are the only product offered that has this. Some differentiators, it is an EPA registered product. A lot of the products out there are what's called FIFRA 25B, and they are exempt from actually having to validate some of their claims because they're off a list of certain inputs. We are an actual copy of molecules, so we actually had to go through, because we're synthesized as a copy, we went through EPA registration. The scientists had to sign off on it. A couple of things also that's unique on top of what I was saying about sucrose octanoate being a unique molecule is that this molecule is also on the National Organic Product List. And a lot of people hear of OMRI. We're also OMRI. That's the Organic Materials Research Institute. We're on that list. But the National Organic Product List is not something you can pay for or get certified for. It's something that the government sees. And what it is if you're a certified organic farm, there's a list of inputs. They don't list brands. They only list the ingredients. And our ingredient is listed on that list for certified organic farming inputs. So that kind of makes it unique. Another unique thing, and this sticks out as maybe someone will be able to tell me there's another one, but I can't think another one that is a food safe insecticide that the overspray is not poison. If there was residuals left, it breaks down very rapidly. But if there was residuals left in your food or something, it's considered tolerance exempt.
So by this you mean like there is no, once you spray it, there's nothing bad left on the plant.
Well, yeah. Let me give you an example. So what this is the CFR means Code of Federal Regulations, and that's the big book of regulations that the government puts out. So what this is what the molecule looks like, and it has esters. It's an ester. Esters are always very safe molecules. Monoditriesters of sucrose octanate in and on all food commodities when used in accordance with good practices. So what this means is if there was residue left over, this molecule breaks down fairly rapidly, 5 to 6 days, depending on environmental conditions. But if you use a lot higher dose, it might, higher concentration, there might be residues. But it's so safe that it doesn't. There's no limit to how much you could have. Basically, you could drink it. That's what I'm saying is how safe it is. An example of something that would be unsafe that there is tolerance limits on it. And someone, I told them this, and they said, "Don't ruin chocolate for me," but I'm going to ruin chocolate for you. So chocolate has an allowable amount of contaminants in it. Very minuscule, but there's even an allowable amount. Let's say mouse poop or something is allowable in there. So there's a tolerance limit. There is no limit for how much sucrose octanate could be left over. And where I'm going with that, and why I think that's important, is it's that safe. And let me give you an idea of what a sugar ester is so that you understand. Sugar esters are already in our food supply. They're in your cosmetics. They're in pharmaceuticals. They're natural emulsifiers and surfactants. Some people call our molecule, I've heard this in the orchid, we have orchid growers who use this, which kind of, if you know orchids, how sensitive they are, that we're safe on orchids kind of says its own thing. But they call it a super surfactant.
Okay.
It has surfactant properties. I like to think of it as Mother Nature's high efficiency detergent. When we have these newer high efficiency washing machines, you're supposed to use a certain type of soap that's not super sudsy, no phosphates and all that.
Yeah.
And I kind of look at this. So the way the molecule works.
We have a question. Do
Oh,
we
sorry. Go ahead.
know what it does when it's combusted and smoked?
Yes, that's where I was going.
Perfect.
So I'll jump. Well, yeah, I'll jump around. Actually, I like the questions coming rapid fire. It makes it more fun. So one, it breaks down so fast it's not going to be in your smoke unless you're going to smoke wet flour or something like that. And here's why. This is from the EPA. This is from the original EPA thing, and I'll speak to that.
Someone wants to know how it compares to Dr. Zymes. I'm not sure if you are familiar with Dr. Zymes.
Well, yes, I can absolutely do that. But let me answer this other question real
Okay.
fast. Okay, so it breaks down rapidly, and there's the environmental conditions. So also, it does not penetrate the plant. It
Okay.
actually cleans the stoma, and so the plant has better gas exchange. But let me compare and contrast, because people are used to other products and things, and we'll talk to Dr. Zymes in a second. So on the oil side, most things are oils or have oils. Like Trifecta has Dr. Zymes ingredient, but it also has a bunch of oils. There's combinations of things, and if you want, I'll go into what I call the classifications that are being used today and how that breaks down in a second. But so the oils are going to penetrate into your plant, and if I'm smoking cannabis or whatever I'm smoking, I want it to be just pure cannabis oils and pure cannabis plant, not corn oil or whatever the other ones. This is why we hear the bro science, as I call it. You can't put oils up past a certain time in flour because it'll show up in a test, or one, it'll be in your product. Depends on who cares, right? This doesn't penetrate your plant. This is a safe product from cloning to day of harvest. When I was at MJ BizCon in Vegas this last year, we had a group that came up to me, and they were like, they said, "I just want you to know that we are taking a garbage can of Organishield mixed, and we're dunking our whole plant in it because they wet trimmed, and then they throw it in the twister." And another group said they hung dry it to do that. And I was like, "Why?" And they said, "Well, because," and this is an off label. This is not a claim I'm going to make because I don't get in trouble for making claims, but this is what they shared, that they don't have to worry about PM because it does. They saw that it killed PM. They knew it broke down rapidly. They knew it was safe. And then I said, "Well, hopefully use that garbage can that you dunked it in and just get the particulate out, and then you can spray that again because it's still good." And so they said, "Yeah, that's what they did." But that's an example from a user of how they did that. Does that answer their question? Because I'll go to Dr. Zymes in a second if you want.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if it's breaking down within 5 days, it's, yeah, not something that needs to be worried about? It's not showing up on testing. I mean,
Yes,
um,
I'm kind of waiting for it to. I'm thinking someone's going to overuse it and it's going to show on a test, and then go, well, here's the CFR that says I don't have to worry about that,
yeah.
but it's yet to happen. But where I was going with the safety level of this is so. Imagine if this was used in a place where people process food or animals for packaging. You can't have anything because they can be as dramatically so as they want. You're going to have pests at some point. The only thing they can use is strips in the air because any overspray would be poison. We're the only thing I can think of that's not poison is an overspray.
Yeah, I mean, what about like biologicals? I usually use like, bacillus blends or trichoderma, which
Sure.
is ubiquitous or like, everywhere anyway.
Yes. So we have a group, and there's some videos out there if you search on YouTube. There's a group in well, I think they sell, but they're in Fort Collins, and they use biologicals. They're certified organic. They're hemp grow, indoor hemp grow, and they had spider mite problems, and so they used parasitic wasp, and they were using ladybugs and things like that. And so what they would do, the basically the law of numbers happened, and out if you think about it, outside there is a balance of predator things outside.
Mhm.
Inside, the law of numbers, they just propagate too fast, and so it's hard to get enough ladybugs and things in there. So that had happened to this group, and that video is out there to watch. But they had 95% knockdown first spray on spider mites with it. And so what they do is they spray it, and then the next day they release their beneficials. And one of the things they were releasing were ladybugs, and this is considered soft on beneficials is the best way to put it because at a high enough dose, it's going to kill something, or like a predator mite. We would probably kill a predator mite because it's not
Soft
AI
bodied.
solution. It's not going to know the difference between a good and a bad mite,
Yeah.
but in general, it's considered very safe. Um,
So is this primarily used for soft-bodied insects or pests then?
Yes, the labeling is. Now we've found other things, but yes, the labeling. For instance, you're familiar with a Japanese beetle. Have you ever
Yes.
heard the term? Okay, so Japanese beetle is a shelled bug. It's a beetle bug. So even at 2%, we don't kill that, but at 2.5%, we kill it in 30 seconds. And so it kind of depends. It works on the soft parts of the bug's body. Essentially, that's the best
What
way to say it. Sorry.
what are the mechanisms then for killing? Like how is it actually killing it?
Sure. The mode of action is a physical kill. And this is another great thing about it. The mode of action being a physical kill when it makes contact with the bug. And that's why when we say the biggest learning curve I've had to share with people is we got used to spraying poison. So I'm like, you got to spray where the bug's hide, spray under the canopy first, then down. And you can spray this around the roots and all. But when it makes contact with the bug, it emulsifies the bug's body, the bug's cuticle. Just like I said, a super surfactant or a soap, it washes. Imagine the bug's cuticle, which is the skin of the bug, or the soft parts of the cuticle. Imagine that's dirt, and imagine Organishield is your detergent. It washes it away, it puts a hole in it, and then it dries it out, and the environment, does the rest. And depending on how well that bug got hit, is how fast it tends to die. So it's usually minutes to hours. This is a gruesome way to look at it, but if there was a bunch of bugs coming at us and we had a bug shotgun to kill the bugs, the ones who took the major blast, they die fairly fast. The ones that got winged in the back, they probably die the next day. So it's kind of that thing. It's considered a contact killer, but I don't. That means it does better to make contact to kill it. But I don't like to say that it kills as soon as it makes contact. That's a little scary even.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
So
So,
so on this, another thing to sort of kind of go into the safety thing, and I'll talk to Dr. Zimes, is we have a bee label also for honeybee for the kill of varroa mite.
okay.
I didn't know if you knew that. We have another
No, that's
mushroom.
awesome. So you can apply it to honeybees to kill varroa mites?
Yes. Here's the dose is a lot less. Now, if you think about a bee's a fuzzy, hairy little creature,
Mhm.
and the bee. So I think the dose on the bees. And I can pull up the label if you want, but it's a different label. So the label that you've seen, the one you have that you've sprayed, that's a different dosing label, but it's the exact same active ingredient, same concentration.
Okay,
Um,
because I'm getting a
so
hive this spring, this coming up spring, so that's good
mhm.
to know.
So what you do with it is basically, you know how the honeybee lays, they lay little larvae inside the
Mhm.
the cells. So
Yep.
what happens is the varroa mite gets in there. I think it's one or two. There's some type of ratio that's always in there, and then they reproduce. And it's not that they try to kill the bee. It's a symbiotic, not a co-symbiotic, but it's a parasitic.
Parasitic,
It's a
yeah.
parasitic. Yeah, it lives off of it. And so what the thing to do is a timing with this is you lift the tray, spray the tray so that it has some gets Organishield in there, and that kills the mite. Like cyclamen mites or row mites are really small. We kill cyclamen mites so easy on strawberries and things like that. It's also a miticide insecticide. I guess I should have gone a little deeper, but that's how it kills those. But what people don't understand about bees, I'm I've learned this, so this is not that I'm the PhD in beekeeping and everything, but I've talked to people with their PhD in apiary and things. And so the way the varroa mite does, it goes from bee to bee to bee and feeds a little bit off, but it wants the bee to stay alive. So there's under the bee's wing, there's a fat port, and it that's where it sucks the juice out of the bee, but it leaves an open port, and then it goes to the next bee, the next bee. And what happens is that port gets infections. That's how it's not that neonicotinoids kill bees. That's one of the chemical bad things that pesticides out
Mhm.
there. It's
Yeah.
that it gets the neonicotinoids gets in that port, and that's what kills the bee. It's not that because you could spray bees directly if there's no mites on them, and it won't, and the neonicotinoids don't hurt them. But
Interesting.
so yeah, and this is I learned from these apiary guys. So I'm saying this second, third hand because this is not my field of study, but I find it very interesting. So Organishield has that capability, or it has the label. We have three uses labels: the one you have, the honeybee label, and then we also have a mushroom label for growing mushroom compost to kill like the flies and the stuff. You can spray it, like they use compost right for growing mushrooms, and so this is the shit for their shit. Is the little joke, and it's already being sold in the mushroom space, the commercial mushroom space in Pennsylvania. We're labeled there, and also we have a group in Texas that uses. And this is just a recent development. We've had that label for a while, but being that it was on the National Organic Product List, the substance, one of the guys in the mushroom space reached out to me and asked, said, "Hey, can I use this on mushrooms?" And he didn't know we had a label because we hadn't put it out. So I send him the label, and the next day, the head of mushroom flies at Penn State reaches out, and they started doing studies last August. And now we may be the solution for the mushroom fly problems that they have in these big mushroom places.
That's awesome. That is so great. Cat Lady is excited down there dancing. She's our
Oh, is she?
mushroom guru, mushroom
Oh, cool.
madam. So,
Well,
a lot of the folks in here play around with mushrooms, and that was one of my biggest problems with the last bin I had was I had gnats in my
fungus net. Yeah, I'm
yeah.
scared of flies. Well, let me share a little bit on that. Oh, that's your little thing. Let me share a little bit, and I'll go to Dr. Zymes. Let me share a little on the mushroom how it works because we've had people in the cannabis space. And there's videos you can see where it kills powder mold. I'm not making the claim, but they tell us it does, and yeah, I've seen it.
Well,
So
I wanna just say powdery mildew is a very weak fungus compared to many funguses, and as long as you disrupt and make the habitat,
clean.
inhabitable for PM,
Oh
it
yeah, you could
typically
use
can be I mean, even
you
just water that's a
or baking
different
soda, a little
pH.
baking soda, even baking soda will disrupt the pH of stuff. So, but what I was getting at was that this is safe on mushrooms because people go, well, it's a fungus. I'm like, well, mushrooms propagate by mycelium, and mold spores are other things propagate by spore, right? By mold spores. And so the mold spores, not the like when you're doing a spore print with a mushroom, but the mold spores, it kills those. It kills yeast.
Okay,
It
yeah,
dries yeast, so that's how it works. Okay, so on the doctor, let me go to the Dr. Zymes. Refresh me on that. Was like compare it to Dr. Zymes or
yeah, a lot of folks, how does it compare to Dr. Zymes? A lot of folks like to use Dr. Zymes because of
sure.
its safety. I
Mhm.
personally do not use Dr. Zymes because they won't tell you what's actually in what enzyme it is, and I'm like such a huge enzyme fan. Every enzyme has a specific action, and that they won't
Yes,
say
you're
what
right.
kind of enzyme it is. The only active ingredient listed is citric
Citric
acid.
acid. Well, so yeah, there's a few now. So Dr. Zymes, the I forgot. There's a lady who started that, and Dr. Zymes was the first that I know of on the market that was somebody else can correct me on this, but it was the first uh, that had citric acid. That was his active ingredient. So citric acid is a fermentation process, and that's the enzymes that break it down, and it creates citric acid. Um, so I'll do a little compare contrast. Dr. Zymes, this is what I've been told. I've never personally used it, but if you know trifecta, the same thing that's in Dr. Zymes is in trifecta, plus some oils and some things. And so what I'm saying is they didn't have a patent or a control on citric acid. So it's in also another product called EPM that's commercial use, and it's the highest concentration I've ever seen of citric acid. So if you're a fan of that, that's one if you like a lot of strong citric acid. Now here's
So
my
if you
negatives
just
on
bought citric acid, like I always have citric acid on hand for lowering pH, making gummy bears, all of
it.
that. Like literally, what's the difference then? I mean, you don't.
Well, there's some other things in it. I'd have to look at. Yeah, you're right. They don't tell you all the stuff in it, but there's something to kind of keep it stable. And also, it can't be shipped at freezing temperatures. There's some kind of issue because it's a fermented product. And as soon as you open it, it's going to start breaking down like a lot of other products. It doesn't have a just shelf stability. But let me give you examples of the I'll compare and contrast. Or let me just give you what my thoughts on Dr. Zymes. So one of Dr. Zymes, you have to warm your water up to some extent, and you have to use a very large dose. And if you look up citric acid, just Google citric acid, and it'll say, in soil, it can say can acidify your soil. So,
Yeah.
so those are concerns of mine. Then the other thing I've had people tell me, and this is not me not docking on Dr. Zymes because I've never used it, but they're like, it worked for a while and then it stopped, and they couldn't figure out why. So I said, I don't know how to troubleshoot someone else's product is why it may or may not worked. But and you use it a lot more. So if you look at their advertising, or not their advertising, you look at their label use. If I was going to compare them to percentage of Organishield that you would use, you're using like 3 to 4 times more for your same dose. Because when they advertise it, they don't say I think they'll say instead of saying mixing per gallon, I think their mixing ratios are for a quarter gallon or a half gallon or something. So it makes it seem like a gallon is not quite as expensive as it really is if comparatively to something else.
And okay, so I am typically a person who always goes 50 to 75% recommended dosage because
Sure.
I just feel like that's like most labels of companies put the like maximum efficacy.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So when I applied it, I did 75%. Like I think it's what 60 milliliters per gallon. So I think I did, 15 less, like 45 milliliters per gallon.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Because that's just a habit that I've always just had.
So one more time, what was the last part?
It's just a habit that I've had to go 75% of recommended dosage because of
Gotcha.
marketing and stuff. What are your thoughts
Gotcha.
on that?
Well, if it was a chemical, yeah, I can understand that. But also, like I'll use us as an example. So it's going to be, so this is what our label is going to say 1% to 0.8%. 0.8% is 30 mils a gallon because I've got that calculation in my head all the time. And then 1% is 40, or zero point 0.8 is 30, 1% is 40, and 80 is 2%. So it's kind of, my opinion is go with the label,
Okay.
just because there's a reason why. I mean, for us at least. Now, see, I kind of know where you're going though, because um, the FIFRA products, and most people are used to the FIFRA 25B products, all the oils, all of the Dr. Zymes, those things are FIFRA. So they have
What are
studies,
you
but
saying? Fifra?
it's called FIFRA 25B, FIFRA 25.B. That's a
Okay.
classification. And what that means is you'll notice on Dr. Zymes and your other ones, you're not going to see an EPA register number.
Okay.
Like our product, like if you see the bottle that we sent you, it has an EPA registration number on there. That means that we're an EPA registered product, where the FIFRA 25Bs that I'm mentioning, they're not registered with the EPA. They didn't, in other words, the EPA did not review them and say, hey, this works the way you're claiming it works. Do they work to some degree? Absolutely, or they wouldn't have been able to be on that list of ingredients. So let me go a little deeper. Essentially, a FIFRA 25B product, I can get the list and I can mix however many of those together, and then I can go straight to market. I don't have to validate that mine works or anything. And most of those products, if you did your studies, you could make them really cheap in your bathtub because they're an A plus B plus C equals, or A plus B equals this product. We're like refined. It takes 7 days just to make our product because it's so specialized. So that's a little bit of a difference. So yeah, I would recommend trying the label first. But if you're doing a but I can see what you're saying on the fit for 25B because you're not really sure if that dose is the right dose. Nobody, no, other than they made the claim.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. That's kind of my thoughts behind it. And also just like you just want to be wary of, marketing. You never know with people and companies, they're trying to sell something, So using more isn't always necessarily the best, especially if you're like stacking things.
An easy test, everybody does this: grab a leaf or grab the bug, throw it in a little dish or something, and squirt it, and then just see how long, till it dies at that dose. The thing with Organishield, and I want to talk about all the products you want to talk about, but I just know Organishield well. I know the contrast with others, but the thing about it is people play with the dosing because it's skin safe on you, it's environmentally safe, it has low to no VOCs at all. My one of the owners uses it to clean his countertops in his kitchen because
Oh,
it
wow.
works really it works. It was that safe. It's a food, considered as kind of like a food in some respects. I don't want to tell. I'm not recommending go drink it because I've actually tasted it. It tastes like ass, but um, but it's not sweet. It's not sweet at all. Um, so yeah, it's just super super safe. When I was in Africa, we did a higher dosing. I went out there to validate some things, and we killed ticks on cows.
Hmm,
It was a lot
interesting.
higher dose, but it was skin safe on them. So, like I said, when we were talking before we went live, I was like, there's a lot of things we want to do with this that we can do good in the world, and that's some little things like that. We can replace some things that maybe work but aren't as safe after they do the good.
So you have all of this passion behind this product. You told me before you've been working on it for 10 years, no vacation. Man,
Yep.
you're grinding your nose to the pavement, getting the word out there. What is the passion behind this? What is your relationship with IPM sustainability, like bigger than the company, and but like what's your relationship with this?
Yeah. So I used to grow, and I'm jealous of all the people on here who are able to grow because I'm not able to now because of Organic Shield, which is my other love. But I found this product. We didn't invent this product. This is a product that disappeared. That there was a lot of studies done on it, and the USDA did the field trials and things like that. I found it, and I wanted to take it to market as in the cannabis space because I saw how safe it was, and I'd had a spider mite problem. And like I just showed you guys the dosing, I double dosed because I was the guy. Well, little works, a lot's really going to work. And I, had this major problem. I had circus tents. If anybody's on here has had spider mites and had them bad, you know what I mean by the
Oh yeah.
tents. The webbing was
Mhm.
so bad, and even on one of our videos, you can see how it works in the webbing. I'm a nerd and a geek, and I'm not an entomologist. I've just been at this a long time, and as we were bringing this back to market, I was like, what beats it? What beats it? Because I like to have the best product. And so when I used it, I'm sorry, when I had these circus tents, I came and I was like, what am I going to do? And so at that time, this was a long time ago, everything that had anything to do with cannabis, because it was still evolving, barely legal and coming out, and was super expensive and maybe didn't work. It was kind of all the oils I call the spray and pray. That's why people will have 3 or 4 products and they rotate them, praying that one of them's going to work. So I studied, so I was like, what's going to kill this that's safe and organic? And I found this product, and it didn't list cannabis or anything. And I didn't know what I know now. And I was like, well, is it safe? Because that's one of the questions I always ask, will it work? Is it safe on this? That's the standard thing. And I had those same questions myself. And I looked on the list, and hops. It's been used on hops. It's
Okay.
safe on hops, and if you guys look into all that, if you've ever been to a beer place and you smell the hops, it kind of smells like weed a little bit. But
Mhm.
hops and cannabis are so closely related that you can graft the two. This is what I've been told by botanists, that you could definitely graft the two. So I wanted to bring this to market as a safe thing for the cannabis. That's what started it. And then when we took control of the product, it disappeared. We went through EPA. There's a whole story, but that's another podcast. But we went through EPA. We went through EPA during COVID and brought it back again. And then as we were doing that, I started learning, oh wow, this is more than just cannabis. This is going to help. This can help a lot of different things. And what I was sharing with you before, the molecule is just so safe. So I could talk about studies we've done and things we've seen. I'm not going to make claims because of the manufacturer. We're not supposed to make claims that's not on the label. But I mentioned the ticks. We did that in Africa. I even thought of head lice for children in Africa. That's why they shave their heads, because it's skin safe. And as far as in your eyes, it's like getting shampoo in your eyes. Believe me, I've gotten plenty. And so you just, it doesn't do any damage, it just burns like shampoo. But at the end of the day, anything that we can give the same outcome with our molecule, we're going to have a better safety profile, and for the environment, for the human use. If you spray this on your plant and your dog licks it, you don't have to worry about it. I don't think you can
Yeah.
say that with many other products, even the ones that are considered organic. Fire is organic, but it burns everything down. um, let me touch on is it okay if I go to some benefits?
Yeah, we have a couple more questions.
Sure.
I don't know. I actually may have missed it too. Hands cold. Did you answer his question about the termites? Does it
I'm
make
sorry. Yes, yes, it will kill termites. I did that in Africa. They call them white ants in Africa. But so if you can imagine, the biggest problem. I mean, obviously, eating the wood is a problem, but it will kill them. But the queen is even easier to kill with our substance, because think of how fatty, waxy her body is that produces the eggs. It emulsifies that. The same thing like caterpillars. If you hit a caterpillar directly with this, armyworm, fall armyworm. There's a video I think out there on YouTube of us killing a fall armyworm in Uganda on some sorghum plants. It kills it very fast, and the more squishy of the bug, the faster and easier it is to kill. The more crunchy, I call them squishy and crunchy. The crunchies have the
Mhm.
shells, and the squishy has that. Well, all shell bugs have some type of soft body parts, like an ant. We kill ants. Just depends on the size of the ant, depending on how big a dose how strong the concentration you need to use.
Okay. So, everyone here is very like holistic approach. We briefly talked about that, where you use
Mhm.
multiple methods for integrated pest management, right? Your cultural,
Yes.
biological, chemical. So
Mhm.
Midnight Samurai, he is one of our OG members as well, that he does a lot of the Jadam and
Mhm.
KNF stuff that we were talking about. And so his question would be, how many days in between sprays can you use some of your other, like the Jadam sulfur and Castile soap? Is there any kind of phytotoxicity between the two? And do you need to have do any protocols between spraying different
Sure.
things?
Yeah. Let me touch on all of those. So sulfur. Sulfur is an interesting thing. We have people who use sulfur with it. And the thing with sulfur, and I'll just touch on sulfur. This is not really so much about Organishield, but sulfur itself seems to sometimes be overused. And what can happen with sulfur being overused? Sulfur doesn't kill the aphids and things like that. They use it for mites and things, right? And so um, people get in the habit of a little's good, a lot's better, and then you have the micronized sulfur or the sulfur burners or things. And so you can't see if you have buildup or anything. And my concern always with that is how much sulfur they use, because any type of if there's enough sulfur on the plant, and even if you don't see it, moisture will cause sulfuric acid. Or if you put lipids, so you spray oils and you've got sulfur everywhere, it can create a burn and cause problems. So
Yep.
that's my only caveat with sulfur. So I was never really the sulfur guy, but so we do have people who use it with sulfur. So let me go that, and then the Castile soap. Um, that stuff is awesome. It doesn't seem to affect that at all. This is things who real world things have told us. We had a grow up in Michigan. It was the couple had a store and a grow, and they called us and they said, I thought you said, because we have no oils, there's no oils in our product. And people who do indoor and outdoor are familiar with, you can't spray oils and leave the lights on, or you're not supposed to, and or the heat of the day or whatever. And since we have no oils, then we have no problem with light refraction. But they wanted to use our product, and they sprayed it, and they said, you said this have no oils, why there's this oil mess on our floor? And what we found out is that, like I said, it's like Mother Nature's detergent. It washed the oils away. And,
Crazy.
and so it went down. Well, and then they found that, this was a little anecdotal story, but they found that their infestation was coming in from their air ducts. And so they just sprayed Organishield up in the air ducts, because unlike oils or anything, it was soap. It's like a soap, and it breaks down and leaves nothing behind. I'll show you in a second what this is. What you're really going to like is like, I want to leave you good things, not just kill your bugs. So it breaks down into four things. So you're mixing this with water. It's a concentrate, and the concentrate is 40% sucrose octanate, like we're talking about by volume. The other 60% is, guess what? Distilled water. The reason we don't sell it at a higher concentration is the EPA specification is 40% sucrose octanoate. So I would love to sell it at a higher concentration. So so I'm not selling you water, but it is what it is. So when you spray this, it lands on the plant, kills the bug. It'll leave a little shine on the plant as it slowly biodegrades. It breaks down into 4 things. Well, obviously water, because you mixed it with water, but fatty acids, the microbes eat your fatty acids, carbohydrates, and CO2. It off gases CO2 right on your stoma. So the plant can gas exchange. Oftentimes people tell us about the praying hands. I'm sure everybody's heard the leaves do the stick thing up. So the point I'm trying to make is that, okay, there's a lot of things that can kill bugs. Like we were saying, I was making a joke that fire kills bugs, but it also burns your plant. We kill your bug, but then we give you something beneficial that the plant can use and in the environment, and then it goes into nothingness and there's nothing left behind except dead bugs. And that's kind of what I love about it so much, is that whole cycle, the whole, the circular, regenerative ag, whatever you want to call it. We are, even though we are a synthesized molecule and product, we're Mother Nature. So it's kind of the insecticide. It just is, just is what it is.
Is there anything you want to share, like any last parting advice on use, on life, on growing, on anything?
Yeah. A couple things on use. Make sure you spray where the bugs hide. And if some of my friends, when I gave this to them, they became, I guess because they were guys, were like, let's go bug hunting. And so they went out and tried to find every bug they could and just spray it to see what would happen and that kind of stuff. So that was fun. So just, on that, it's safe for your animals. That's another reason we brought it to market. I think it's a good product for you guys. And please share it with everybody. On life, like I told you earlier, I've been at this for at least, I had to look back, and maybe it's longer than 10 years, but it's been, no, I take that back. It's 10 years since I had the idea, and then about 9 years since we started trying to take the market. But yes, I've been at this for a while, and this is my passion. If you can find a passion, this is something the rest of my life. I'll be working on this until the day I'm dead, until we hit the goal of everything out there that we can do with this. I'll be at it. So if you can find something that gets you guys that passionate, then do it. And I just feel very blessed that I'm a part of this. I'm a nobody, but this product is everything.
IPM starts with prevention and ends with chemical controls that are preferably as safe and easy to use as Organishield. But remember, pests need to be attacked from multiple angles and treated specifically to the species present. Identifying and understanding your pest is the first step to treating them. And when growing outdoors, you're gonna have pests, so let it go. Just remember, those pests are contributing to the complex bouquet of your garden. The more diversity in organisms, the more diversity in secondary metabolites, which we discussed in greater detail with Dr. Riley Kirk, featured in episode 2, and whose full interview is available at patreon.com/queenofthesungrown. For only $3 a month, you can contribute to this podcast and listen to all of our full interviews. We're completely self-funded and made possible by listeners like you. And friends of the show get the opportunity to sit in on these live interviews, ask questions, as well as receive free products in our guest giveaways. Other members of the Patreon are Blaze participants that are citizen scientists that are collecting data on our nationwide grow along, where we are noticing the differences in flowering in various regions across the U.S. This project will help cultivators choose genetics for their growing zone, and your contribution to that tier is making this research possible. Please consider supporting us on patreon.com or making a purchase in the online shop at queenofthesungrown.com, where we offer a wide range of classes and sustainable gardening products. Thank you for listening to this week's episode on integrated pest management, and make sure to tune in next week to a special guest interview. Thank you, Brandon Russ of Okashi Earthworks and Holt of Organishield. This episode was written by me, Alexandria Irons, and produced by Cat Lady, my right-hand babe. So, remember, pests are part of nature, and we all have a right to live here, right? So, until next week, see you then. Happy gardening.
choosing to be sad.